Hello and welcome back to Model Railroading 101. I'm John, and today we're continuing our discussion about operating sessions. In March of 2020, the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic led state and county health departments in my area to limit public contact. Operating sessions are one of the things that got affected by these directives. One of the clubs in my area, Silicon Valley Lines, is very operations focused. So this was a really big deal for them. Normally, they hold a 4 to 6 hour op session at least once a month. You might recall we did a video in the Model Railroading 101 series about informal DTC operations recently, where we visited Silicon Valley Lines during one of their regular operating sessions to demonstrate how their DTC operations work. Not only is the layout built for operations, but it's also fairly large. So as many as 25 people might be present for an op session there. Well, we can't do that right now due to social distancing directives from our county health department that have been in place for the past several months. So the emergence of the pandemic meant they couldn't meet anymore for an undetermined amount of time. But they were determined to find a way to operate. Not only because that's what they love, but because that's what the club really was built for. So using technology and some ingenuity, they've come up with a way to hold virtual operating sessions remotely, where some of the operators are actually operating from miles away using a virtual private network, or VPN, that's tied into the layout control system on site. The operators are able to see what they're doing through the use of streaming video from cameras mounted either on the models running themselves on the layout or placed strategically in positions above the layout for a top-down view. The dispatching can also be done remotely. That means very few people are needed on site, which allows them to socially distance while they're monitoring the layout for derailments and other problems. These operators on site also do the local switching jobs. So when I heard about this, I was intrigued and thought if we could share what they've done there, it could help others around the country, or possibly even around the world, to set up a similar way to run ops remotely so fewer people would have to risk being exposed to COVID. I called my friend Bernard, who's the current president of Silicon Valley Lines, and suggested doing a Model Railroading 101 video about their remote ops. He said he thought it was a good idea, and he agreed to explain how SVL has dealt with the challenges of creating this remote operations for their layout. So let's go to Silicon Valley Lines and talk to Bernard now.
Hello, my name is Bernard Beck. I'm the president at Silicon Valley Lines in San Jose, California. Today I'm going to talk about how we're dealing with the coronavirus impact on our operations at our model railroad. Silicon Valley Lines is an operations-focused layout. We have been around in this location since the early 2000s, and every Friday at the end of the month, we're running an operation session. Club comes down, there are 10, 12, 15 people here that run the layout, and we have a lot of fun. This is great. This year, it's the year 2020. Coronavirus hit and everything shut down, and it was very clear very quickly that we cannot continue with the style of operations that we have been doing for quite a while. We have several elderly members, we have people that are concerned, we have people with pre-existing conditions. It is just not safe to be down here in the basement with this many people. However, we still all would like to run operations. We are a club that is interested in operations. So when the shutdowns hit, we had small operation sessions at members' houses. A member sets up the layout and does a small operation session where over video conference club members give instructions as the conductor, and the member at their house on their own layout runs the train. That works. But we have a really large layout, and we were missing the ability to run trains on our large layout. That's why we built this. So what can we do? We decided that we're in the middle of Silicon Valley. We can do something. We have the technology to do this. We just need to plug it together. So that led us to the idea of building a camera car. The technology is there. There are small single-board computers like the Raspberry Pi Zero that fit inside the loading gauge for HO that we thought we can massage to make it work to go through tunnels and be completely independent. And then we just needed a little bit software to connect the computer to a video conference and then send a signal from the video conference out to our members. So the hardware problem was relatively easily solved. What was much more interesting is getting the software to work. We needed to find a video tool that is very low overhead because the Raspberry Pi Zero is not particularly powerful. We needed to find a way to connect the video signal from the Raspberry Pi that's in a locomotive to our members that are distributed out in the valley. So we decided to try and connect this to a video conference tool. The Raspberry Pi software that we're using is MJPEG Streamer. We use OBS Project to pull the video signal from the Raspberry Pi and inject it into a virtual web camera. The virtual web camera, in turn, participates in a Google Meet session. Zoom works just as well. And from there, people can watch what's happening in front of a train. We also set up a VPN connection so that members can connect from their smartphone over the VPN connection back into the club and run engine driver or Y-throttle and control the engine that they're seeing on the video feed remotely. So you take this together, what happens is you have an engineer who is located miles away at their home, in their living room, in their office, controlling on their smartphone an engine where they see the video signal over a video conference delivered into their web browser. This sounds horribly complicated, and this cannot possibly work. Actually, it does. And the biggest problem that we ran into is the uplink bandwidth on our internet link at the club. The bandwidth out of a locomotive, even in SD, is several hundred kilobit. If we did it in HD, it is on the order of 2 megabits, and that by itself is just enough of bandwidth that is available on our uplink, our internet uplink. So we cannot run multiple independent streams out of each locomotive to each individual member. However, OBS allows us to combine multiple streams into a single stream, and that way we're preserving bandwidth, and it's pretty easy to put 4 camera feeds into a single stream that then is injected into the video conference. That way we're preserving bandwidth, the little bandwidth we have, and we have just enough bandwidth left over to also run a YouTube live stream. It's a little bit dicey. We are on a not super stable DSL connection, so I turn the live stream on, I turn the live stream off. The difference in quality is actually visible, so we're still experimenting with that and trying to figure out what the right parameters are to both support our members and run trains, while also broadcasting what we're doing out here on a live stream. We're here in Nauer's yard. Train 801 is currently set up already for the session that we're going to start in a little while. It's a relatively short train. We have our usual units up at the front, and then ahead of that we have our camera car. The camera car is basically a flat car with a styrene sled mounted on top. You can see the styrene sled here under the camera. Mounted on the styrene sled down here, this is a Raspberry Pi Zero. Mounted on top of the Raspberry Pi, we're using a device called the Juicebox Zero. The Juicebox Zero is a nifty little device that connects the battery that we have back here to the Raspberry Pi. The idea is that it conditions the power and the Raspberry Pi gets a nice stable power source. Up in the front, this is the camera. We're using a Raspberry Pi Zero spy camera. The only reason I'm using the spy camera is it's nice and small. There is a really tiny lens in the front. It's okay quality. We're running in SD anyways, so because of bandwidth constraints, so it's fine. It's not the highest quality camera, but it works perfectly fine for our purposes. The other thing you can see down here is on the sled, I screwed the Raspberry Pi to the styrene sled so that it actually stays in position. But the whole thing is removable, and I'm holding it in place just with rubber bands. Rubber bands are great. They work for everything. The Juicebox Zero out of the box comes like as a naked circuit board, so it does require soldering this header here to the board. If you're familiar with soldering, if you're good at that, don't look at my solder points here too closely. I'm not a great electronics person, but I get it to work, and if I get it to work, you get it to work. This is not hard. You just have to be a little bit careful. Over here in Bayshore Yard, we wanted to show you a different way of hiding away the electronics. Since if you think about it, these electronics on a flat car are really not that pretty. They're very much in your face, and the effect is not quite as nice when you watch the train. So what we have done here is we took a dummy locomotive and mounted the electronics inside the dummy locomotive. You can see the spy camera up here in the front. It's mounted right in the hood and gives a nice view out on the track here. The electronics that you saw on the flat car earlier are hidden underneath the locomotive shell, and there's a battery in the rear here. There is not a lot of space in this locomotive, even though it is a dummy. So we only mounted a relatively small battery. This battery lasts for about 30 minutes, but our operating sessions run anywhere between 4 to 6 hours. And so we need a little bit more power from somewhere. If there's no space in the locomotive, we can put the battery in a trailing car, or we can even put a battery in a trailing dummy locomotive and have a nice long lash up that way. What we have done here in this example is we took a well car and mounted a regular USB battery bank in that well car. Again, this is on a styrene sled. Just a couple mounts on the side, easy 30-minute work to glue it all together. and fitted to the car. The USB battery bank is connected to the locomotive just with a regular USB plug that goes straight into the Raspberry Pi and the JuiceBox Zero. And this guy is big. It has 4 times as much capacity as the little battery I showed you earlier on the flat car. So this is going to last us through a whole session. And since it's external, I have a second one of those. In case it doesn't last, I can just swap it out. One thing we like to do is to give the feeling of railroading when our remote operators interact with the dispatcher and the dispatcher interacting with the few people in the layout room. So we're using FRS radios, and one of the problems that we ran into was how do we connect the FRS radio to the video conference that we're running. Down here, the radios talk directly to each other, but for operators that are remote, that are sitting at home, they need to participate and reach the dispatcher somehow. And a dispatcher is reachable over FRS radio. One way to do this is obviously have the dispatcher participate in the meet session as well. However, there is another way to do this. What we did is we're using a audio cable that's plugged in to the radio and connects directly into a computer. So this connects the output of the radio to the input of the computer and the output of the computer to the input of the radio. What's important is that when the radio is plugged in, it detects that there is something connected. And this is meant for headsets, but it works for connected computers just as well. And this feature is called walks. So as soon as the radio detects there is a headset, or in our case, a computer connected, it will turn on walks mode. And what that does is that any output from the computer automatically triggers the transmitter of the radio, so the radio starts sending. That way, when someone says something in the video conference, the radio detects it through walks and starts transmitting. There is a short delay, about 2 seconds or so before the radio is sure that someone is talking. So people have to account for that, and we're just adding filler words before they actually want to say what to say. SVL, train 801 to dispatch. And by that time, the radio has picked up that someone is talking, and dispatch hears that train 801 is calling. So now we have 4 views on the screen right now. Train 801 is approaching Escape. Train 802 is approaching Mount Marble. And train 226 is ready to go in staging. It's not moving yet. We also added a overview camera in ours. And this is OBS, by the way. And I can switch the overview to another overview camera that shows the Harbor Bridge in Bayshore. So if there are trains moving out of Bayshore, they can be seen in that. So this is the dispatcher's office. Normally, during operating sessions, people that are here get their paperwork for their train, and this is the switch list for train 802. Currently, we're running train 802 with a remote operator, so of course they cannot walk into the dispatcher's office and get their paperwork. So to fix that, we shared all the paperwork before the session as PDF files so that they can look at what they're supposed to do online, download it, and look at it on their screen while they're running the train. So normally operators that are running at the layout can see their trains and follow them along. We have a brakeman for the remote operators that the remote operators deal with, who helps them with derails and train splits and stuff like that. The other thing we're doing is for the remote operators, we give them the trains that are running long distance from yards to staging or from staging to the yards so that there is minimal switching involved. And for the few people that are at the layout room, we give them the local trains that have a lot of switching so that they directly have they're at the layout at their train, can move the cars around as needed. And there is a lot of social distancing around them because all the through trains that would normally interfere with their work, where people get in their way in the aisles, are not there. They are running remotely. So as we go through the session, one thing that becomes pretty clear is that we have only one communication channel. We use that communication channel for dispatch to talk to train crews, and we use the same channel for the brakeman to talk to the train crews. And what happens is that there is a lot of back and forth between the brakeman and the train crews as they fix problems, derailments, and what else is going on. And dispatch is not getting through. So we have dispatch set up a tablet to connect directly to the Google Meet, and now they can break in and also use chat with the remote operators to get their instructions across. That makes it a lot better for the flow of the session, and it seems it's really helping with communication. What we're finding is that having several communication channels helps a lot, and just one channel is not enough when there are 3 or 4 trains running at the same time. It's fine for 1 or 2 trains of remote operators, but as of today we're running for the first time with 3 trains in parallel, and it's just too much. There's too much chatter on the channel, so we're setting up parallel ways to communicate. And even though down here it is much quieter than normal, there is a lot of activity on the layout in the session for the dispatcher, and looks like a lot of fun right now. So we hope you get an idea about how we're setting up our remote operating sessions, how we set up the equipment, how we communicate with our operators. It's clearly not perfect yet. We're working on it, and every time we run a session, we are improving on what we're doing and where we want to take it next. So if you like what you've seen, or if you have any other questions, please let us know. We're Silicon Valley Lines in San Jose, California. Our website is www.siliconvalleylines.com.
Let's talk about the Silicon Valley Lines website real quick here. This is important because it'll bring all the stuff Bernard was talking about into focus. They've gone through the trouble of documenting most of what we've talked about here on the program, both in photos and written instructions, including written code and configuration settings for all the components that were discussed here. Check it out. It's www.siliconvalleylines.com. I realize that not everyone lives in an area as tech-savvy as Silicon Valley, and that's okay. The concepts Bernard talked about don't require an excessively high level of expertise in order to set up. That was the most important question I asked Bernard before I decided to do this program. If the concepts they were using would be too complicated for other people to get useful ideas from. I want to mention also, and this is important, that this program is being produced during a time when we have an active pandemic. But remote operations could also be useful for people who live in out-of-the-way places and can't drive to a layout that might be hours away. It could also come in handy if members of an organization have physical limitations that also prevent them from being there in person. So the concepts being discussed in this program have a multitude of practical applications. Keep in mind also that this is still in its early stages and it's not perfect just yet. With an upgrade to their internet bandwidth and a few more test sessions, this method of running remote op sessions can easily help anyone operate without having to be present at the layout. I want to thank Bernard again, and Silicon Valley Lines as well, for sharing their remote ops setup. I also think it's worthwhile to know if you're interested in becoming a member at Silicon Valley Lines, you can check out their website, siliconvalleylines.com, and who knows, maybe you'll be running a train virtually from some other place in the world on one of their upcoming virtual op sessions. I'm always looking for ideas to cover on Model Railroading 101, so if you have one, please put a comment below. And subscribe now so that you don't miss anything. Also, did you know that you can help promote the hobby of model railroading by supporting this channel on Patreon? Go to patreon.com/tsgmultimedia to learn how you can help for as little as 7 cents a day. Thanks for watching and make it a great day.